Shit, we gonna react to Diddy could be connected to Biggie Smalls' murder, ex-Bodyguard, which I already knew. I've been saying this for like a good minute that he has something to do with Big's murder. He part of it. Not on camera, but I always say that shit off camera. You know what I mean? We're gonna get right into this shit. Hold on. Alright, let's check this out.
Someone who had essentially been at Sean Combs' side for years now seems to suggest the rapper, business mogul, and now indicted criminal defendant may have had something to do with the killing of Notorious B.I.G. We're going to break down this claim made in a brand new documentary about Combs, and we're going to discuss it all with renowned criminal defense attorney to the stars, Brian McMonagle. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. One of the greatest unsolved crimes in the last 50 years has been the murder of Notorious B.I.G., Christopher Wallace. Happened back on March 9th, 1997. The rapper was gunned down in a drive-by shooting out in Los Angeles after Vibe magazine's Soul Train Awards party.
That's the crazy part about that is that Big wasn't even supposed to be in Los Angeles. He was supposed to perform out in London, but he decided he wanted to like stay in Los Angeles. But Diddy, he just kept on pushing them to just to stay in Los Angeles. They got to do like some type of promotion or whatnot. If it wasn't for that, he would have still been alive still to this day.
At the Peterson Automotive Museum.
Like,
and though there have been theories and speculation and rumors, no arrests have ever been made in connection with this killing. But now, an accusation has surfaced that perhaps Sean Diddy Combs, the man we have been focusing upon a lot lately, could have been involved somehow in this shooting. And this insinuation comes from Gene Deal. Now, Gene Deal is Combs' former bodyguard, who has been quite outspoken about Combs recently, especially after Combs has been accused of sexual assault in multiple lawsuits and currently sits in a Brooklyn detention center awaiting trial on federal sex trafficking, racketeering, and prostitution charges. His trial is currently scheduled for May 5th, 2025. But you see, Mr. Deal, who was reportedly Combs' bodyguard from 1991 to 2005, sat down for an interview in a new documentary called Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy that aired on Peacock. And I want to read you what Deal said, because when he was asked about Combs and Biggie, he remarks, so did he directly have something to do with it? He could have. And he bases that off of his perception that Combs was maybe acting a little weird leading up to the 24-year-old's death. He says on the show, the week which Biggie was murdered, he was just acting real anxious and trying to get big at this party. And what's crazy was Big was telling people he had to be in London, but Puff was telling people he ain't going to London that whole week. So you fast forward to the day of the party, and Deal says, I'm sitting up at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and I get a phone call. It's about 9 o'clock. And they say, Gene, get ready, we going to the Vibe party. I was like, we going to this party? We don't have no security. But according to Deal, he tried to warn Combs that this probably wasn't a good idea. He says, yo, Puff, I got some intel, bruh. He said, what? I said, yo, man, if we go to this party tonight, one of us is going to get killed.
Saying bro like that is crazy.
Somebody going to die, because now we had East Coast, West Coast beef. He said, yo, Gene, I don't want to hear that S, so we all jump in the car. Now, this East Coast, West Coast beef was in reference to the infamous rivalry in the hip-hop world that lasted several years in the 90s between West Coast Death Row Records, so we're talking about Suge Knight, Dr. Dre, Tupac Shakur, who, by the way, was tragically killed in 1996 in Las Vegas. Actually, some believe that Biggie was killed as retribution for Tupac's death. And then on the other side, we have the East Coast. We have Bad Boy Entertainment, Bad Boy Records.
Why kill Big in retaliation to Pac's death? Because Big had nothing to do with that. That was just a Tupac thing. That was just a Tupac and Orlando Jordan thing and whatnot. He jumped Orlando Jordan with Death Row dudes. Next thing you know, you're led up to the shooting of Tupac. But thanks to Khadifi's dumbass, he the one that told the whole entire story that got him locked up in the first place.
It's Combs' label with his artist Biggie. And when you think Diddy and Biggie, you're thinking hits like Mo Money, Mo Problems. It's all about the Benjamins, Victory. So Deal explains what happens when they all leave the Vibe party. Quote, I was in a car with Puff. Big was in his own car. And the next thing you know, you hear pow, 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 pow. The FBI has stated, by the way, that Biggie was in the passenger seat of a Chevy Suburban when a Chevy Impala pulled up at a red light. A shooter just opened fire. Deal says after Biggie was shot 4 times, Deal tried to make sure that Biggie didn't go to sleep but kept talking to keep him alive. And according to Deal, they told him they were taking him to the hospital, to which Deal claims Biggie replied, "Just do it." And Deal says in the documentary, that's the last thing I heard Big say. And they said the hospital was 2 blocks away, and that's the longest 2 blocks I ever seen in my life.
Damn.
Hey, everybody. So I want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this episode of Sidebar. Always love talking about them. Now, here is the incredible thing about Morgan & Morgan. And
Give a fuck about that.
Hey guys, did you know some drivers
parents
are
don't give a
ditching
fuck
their
about
car
these damn ass
insurance
too.
and they're doing this? And
we're actually going to have to hire you guys now.
Here we go. No more ads.
Eve Online is a
After arriving there. Back to Combs, Deal says they go to the hospital. Biggie dies, by the way, less than an hour after arriving there. And Deal explains to Combs what's going on with Biggie. So Puff ran out the hospital door and he grabbed my arm. He said, "Gene, we got to pray. We got to pray. We got to pray." And I knocked his hands off of me. I said, "Pray for what?" And then he basically says that Biggie's dead, bruh. He just was stunned. He just seemed like he had this look in his eye like he couldn't believe it, that he was dead. He couldn't believe it. Now, the documentary makes clear that Combs has always denied involvement in the killings of Biggie and Tupac. And in fact, Diddy's legal counsel issued a statement after the airing of this documentary saying Sean Combs unequivocally denies the baseless allegations being circulated in connection with this documentary. So I want to try to make sense of all of this with renowned criminal defense attorney Brian McMonigal of the firm McMonigal, Perry, McHugh, Mishak, and
Like, if you knew that a lot of stuff that's going down over on the West Coast, then why suggest to everyone to stay over in Los Angeles in the first place? All you could have done was just allow Big to go to London, and next thing you know, everything would have been fine. At least let the whole entire thing die down, and so that none of this shit would have happened. Because if they would have went to London like they were supposed to, then Big would have still been alive still to this day. Just like if Pop wouldn't have jumped Orlando Jordan or Orlando Brown, I think one of his last name is, either way, if Pop wouldn't have jumped him, he possibly would have still been alive to this day too.
Davis. He has famously represented Bill Cosby, Meek Mill. Brian, so good to see you. You're a friend of the show. I'm so happy to see you. Happy New Year. I think you're probably going to be the last person. I say Happy New Year, too. I think we're at the point where I can't say it anymore. Isn't that a rule?
Today's the last
say
day.
it 2 weeks, right? What is it? You can't say it 2 weeks after?
Yeah, I think we might have we might have exceeded the time limit. But Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So you're my last Happy New Year. So what do you make of these claims?
You know, let me be funny or not funny for a minute.
I'm
No
about to say you
biggie,
can't
no
be
deal.
funny in that situation.
I don't see this.
It's your problem.
You know, this is a 30-year-old accusation, and it seems to me that it's getting to a point where Diddy's concerned, where it's dangerously getting to piling on in a way that I think might just help him. As I thought about this last night, once I saw the article in the Post and was referenced on the documentary, it seems to me that there are a lot of people now that are jumping on this bandwagon of making what I would say are baseless allegations against this guy. This one in particular just smells to me. Did this guy say any of this stuff over the past 30 years to anybody in law enforcement? Has there ever been any kind of a suggestion that he was involved by law enforcement? It seemed to me that he was in a close relationship with Biggie, and that if anything, he was on the other side of this East Coast, West Coast fight. So the one thing that I would say about it is just bringing this kind of full circle to this upcoming trial. They're going to be looking for things like this, the defense in this trial. They're going to be looking for accusations that are stretched. They're going to looking for moments that they can disprove things. And make no mistake about it, there'll be a few things like that. And hope that that'll give them the kind of strength and ability to diffuse perhaps as many of these allegations as they can where this indictment's concerned.
Do you? I mean, you think the name Notorious B.I.G. is going to come up at his criminal trial at all? I don't think so.
I don't think this. I don't think this is going to have anything to do with his criminal trial.
Right.
But it's got everything to do with jury selection.
Yeah, it has nothing, like, the Biggs murder has nothing to do with whatever it is that Diddy got going on. Like, Biggs murder is not involving no human trafficking.
It's
Right.
got
Right.
and it's got everything to do with just where he stands in the eyes of the public and perhaps his jury as he starts a trial.
Because in other words, what you're saying is this
I
documentary,
did not
these words
realize
that could take.
Yo, I did not realize Big was that damn cockeyed. I did not even realize he was that damn cockeyed. I thought like his eyes were straight the whole time, but I didn't realize he was actually just cross-eyed.
To future jury.
There's no question about it. I mean, people watch these shows. I mean, some of these shows are great, obviously, and people watch them. And now they come into this trial, not only with the allegations that are made against him in the indictment, but the idea that he might have been a party to a murder. And so it's dangerous for the defense just in terms of jury selection. And this is going to be something that they're going to have to use in jury selection to see if anybody's watched these documentaries, listen to them. And these will be juries they're going to have to strike, as they try to prepare for this trial.
Can I give you a little bit more background on this to why I think this is an interesting that's coming out here? Because first of all, you mentioned what did Gene Deal say in the past? Well, Gene Deal apparently said back in 2003 on the Art of Dialogue show, wasn't no drive-by. The car was standing there at the corner. The stories they tell is not truthful. He previously told Vlad TV, and apparently this is backed up by an FBI investigation file that was obtained by The Sun back in 2018, and that it's possible Combs was the intended target. That's radically different than what we're saying now, that Sean Combs was the intended target that night.
Yeah, it's night and day. I mean, that's really my point. I mean, you're reinventing history at some point. Before you know it, we're going to get. I think that if he was old enough, they might try and put him on the grassy knoll, Jess. I just think at some point in time,
it would have been interesting. It would have been a major plot twist if Big would have still been alive and P. Diddy was the one that was meeting the bullet. Times would have definitely changed if that would have happened.
Someone is going to cry on one of these things, and this.
But then again, both should still be alive though. One person shouldn't have to die behind that. Like, no matter who you are, like nobody deserves to die. No, fuck, I'll take that back. It depends on what you have done that's really, really fucked up. But at the end of the day, it's like both P. Diddy and Big should still be alive, including Pac as well.
Be the time. I mean, here's a situation where he goes from a potential target in a drive-by shooting to now a culprit in the murder. It's troublesome if I'm putting myself in the shoes of his lawyer, because I am worried now that all of this is just this avalanche of publicity, all negative, nothing positive, that you got to deal with in addition to the facts of your case.
Well, I would counter that by saying this. Look, there's no evidence to suggest that Sean Combs was involved in the death of Biggie, and I would, but, and I'm going to read something in a minute from
Might be surprised.
Stone article. The argument would be, if at any point in time in Sean Combs' life, if he was really going to be investigated for what he did in the past, right now, after being hit with so many lawsuits, after being hit with criminal charges, after having his bail denied, he's locked up, you're seeing more and more people come out, this would be the time that people would come forward with information about what they know of him in the past. And
my thing is, why do it now? Why couldn't it have been done like way back in the day or whatnot? Like, why do it now? Because you have all this time to be able to do this from back then, and then all of a sudden it's like, now you want to do it after the man has been locked up? You should have done it earlier, at least.
We know there's no statute of limitations on murder. So the reason people might be looking at this and saying, well, if something, we're going to get answers about Biggie and maybe Combs' role, whatever that might be, alleged role, now would be the time. The reason I say that, let's just keep that in mind, because there was an article that came out by Rolling Stone last year, and it was amid all the drama surrounding Combs. This was before his arrest. And it details how Combs liked Tupac Shakur. He admired his talent. But according to a source who was close to Biggie and other bad boy artists, Tupac didn't respect Sean Combs, that both he and Biggie saw Combs as a, quote, corny executive. And when this bond developed between the two artists, former bad boy president Kirk Burroughs.
Are you worried that using your home address for business puts your privacy at risk? At iPostal One, we can.
Says Combs became jealous. And reportedly, Biggie was planning to leave Bad Boy before he died. Now, I know.
Now, if that was the case for the reason why Sean wanted Big to stay in L.A. because of that reason, or why he got killed because Big wanted to leave, then yeah, the whole thing would have totally made a lot more sense. Because Big obviously is the man. Like he is still talked about nowadays. And Big planned on just to do what he wanted to do by him having his own label, and decided to leave the record company, knowing damn well that like he's better off just doing it by himself since he's already big, and he Diddy didn't like that. So if that was the case of having Big killed because he planned on leaving Bad Boy, then that makes a lot sense. That makes a lot more sense just to put Diddy as him being accused of being responsible for Big's death.
Know a lot of this is speculation, people trying to read through the
lines. But then again, it's just rumors,
trying to see if something else is there. But again, again, going back to the idea of if we were to have answers about Combs' alleged involvement in what happened to Biggie, I guess people are saying now would be the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one way of looking at it. The way that I would look at it would be now would be the time where people would be piling on with false accusations. And I'm really not trying to make the case for Combs. I don't represent him. But I think there's always a danger in stale accusations, particularly in a case like this where it's easy to pile on and easy to say anything you want about the guy. And because everybody's listening for the negative and no one's listening for the positive. So I hear you. I just think that, this is kind of part and parcel with what we've been seeing over the past several months in this case, which is just this avalanche of bad publicity, some legitimate, perhaps, and some completely incredible. And I'd have to put this one on that incredible side.
Yeah, by the way, I mean, there are those who say it's the complete opposite. So, for example, retired LAPD detective Greg Kading alleged that Biggie was actually killed by a gang member and associate of Death Row Records exec Suge Knight. This was, again, revenge for the death of Tupac, who was killed 6 months earlier.
Which that didn't make any sense. Because why would Big be involved in whatever it is that Tupac got going on that led up to him being killed? It made no sense. And plus, on top of that, Big's killer wasn't a gang member. He was a Muslim nigga with a bow tie.
Randall Sullivan also suggested that Knight was responsible, claimed that he worked with a bent LAPD officer to carry out the killing, although to be clear about that one, the main source for Sullivan's story apparently had mental health issues and memory issues. But, there's two competing narratives about what might have happened. You mentioned something interesting about jury selection. Do they ask these potential jurors, and by the way, my understanding is based on the current schedule, the jury questionnaire forms are due April 11th. What do those forms look like? What are they asked on those jury questionnaire forms to prospective jurors? And once prospective jurors are brought in for a more thorough voir dire process, are they asked everything they know about Sean Combs? Are they asked maybe about East Coast, West Coast, Tupac, Biggie? Are they asked those questions?
Well, the first thing that'll happen is both sides will submit them, and a judge will make a decision as to what the real questionnaire is gonna look like. From the defense side, the more the better. The more areas you can probe in a questionnaire, the better. And so you'll see every question under the sun, particularly as it relates to publications, newspaper articles, documentaries, and the like. asking jurors perhaps to list everyone they've seen, asking jurors if they've seen this one or that one. Now, whether that submission ever gets to a jury remains to be seen, because at the end of the day, the judge is going to take the government's submission and any objections the government has to what the defense is proposing. And then ultimately, they'll bring everybody in. They'll bring a panel of 100, or perhaps in this case, a couple hundred, and they'll have them fill out the questionnaires, whatever they look like. And then each side will get time to review those questionnaires, perhaps a day or so, to look at them. And then jury selection will begin. And a lot of times what they'll...
I do not like juries. I do not want to go to no damn jury duty. Because what they have you be doing, you just be sitting in the goddamn room trying to, like... You basically just sit in the room hearing about the case. You ended up just trying to, like, describe about what's going on, what you feel like what happened and whatnot. You end up coming to a vote about who's guilty and who's not guilty. But you just be up in the room, just sitting there, just be bored and shit. It just like, and it usually happens between like a week or two, probably even more than that, depending on the case. But I really, really hate jury duties. I've been to jury duty last year and it wasn't fun. Like it was just straight up boring. But at the end of the day, I'm happy I didn't get selected at that time and whatnot. But despite not being selected, at least for like a day, that shit was like 8 hours I was in there. That was the worst day I ever been in, because I hate jury duty.
Do in these high profile cases, it's been my experience anyway, is they'll have the government and the defense get together and see if they can agree, after looking at the questionnaires, that there ought to be a pot that they just put what I'll say are going to be excluded jurors in. So they don't even have to bother with them during individual voir dire when they get into the courtroom. But it's really going to be up to this judge how he wants to do it or how she wants to do it. I think we have a male judge still assigned to this case.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm calling it. Diddy's guilty. Diddy is guilty. I'm calling it. If they can do that shit to R. Kelly, they can be able to do it to Diddy.
And, my guess is there'll be a very, very lengthy questionnaire that ultimately gets to these jurors. And if I'm the defense counsel in this case, and they've got preeminent counsel in this case, they're going to be asking everything under the sun.
There were allegations in this indictment, and also specified in a lot of the lawsuits, that Sean Combs is essentially a gangster, right? That he's operating a criminal enterprise, that it involves guns, and there are these beefs that he has with other people. So I'm curious to see if anything like Suge Knight or Tupac or Biggie comes into the course of the trial. What I do have a question, and I think it's important for you to clear it up here. There are those who say, well, wait a minute. Guys, listen, they just raided his homes last year. They got a collection of all of this evidence. Who knows what they found? How does it work if they found something, investigators found something during their search, so they're searching for evidence of sex trafficking and racketeering, and during the course of their search, they find something else? Would we have known about it by now, right? If they found evidence that maybe really did link them to a murder, wouldn't we know about that right now? Maybe not. You tell me. How does it work with if they find something during the course of the search that maybe they didn't intend to find?
Well, it happens quite often, and it'll result, if the evidence is substantial enough and corroborated enough, to perhaps a separate indictment. I would think you'd know about it here, because there's been a huge exchange of discovery, I'm sure, already, and will continue. And unless there is some effort made by the government to seal certain evidence, because it's not part of this indictment and it wouldn't be part of any defense strategy, but it might be the subject of a new grand jury that's going on somewhere, you might not see it. And I'm not saying that happened here, but every now and then they'll go looking for,
you just said it, though.
They'll go looking for thefts and all kinds of other crimes, and they'll find something that leads to something much larger. And perhaps it could even be a homicide. I wouldn't expect that here, but
right.
You never know.
You never know. And let me just end on this point. Again, no evidence to connect Sean Combs to the death of Biggie. And I will tell you, in my perspective, I've always just seen them as incredibly close. I remember as a kid when Combs released...
Hi, I'm Dr. Skylar Holcomb, and I'm here with ATL Dental.
I'll be missing you. You know, that tribute to Biggie after Biggie's death.
As a kid, how old are you? How old is this nigga, man? He gotta be about like 35, 36 at least.
And by the way, you know, he spoke at his funeral service. And by the way, just talking about the impact that Christopher Wallace, Biggie, left. So his body was driven in a hearse through Brooklyn, and several thousand people, they showed up to mourn him, pay their respects.
Remember.
That's how much of an influence he had. You remember that? It was reported by the New York Times that his service was attended by more than 350 people, included Flavor Flav, Mary J. Blige, Queen Latifah, Mayor David Dinkins, of course, Combs spoke. So, you know, I understand people still want answers to this because he still left such an impactful legacy.
Damn, he had to be carried out of here.
And his death at 24 years old is just such a tragedy.
No question about it. And you know, you put it that way, and as I think about it, imagine if you're Sean and you're sitting there in a jail cell facing these enormous allegations against you, and you pick up or you get the opportunity to hear that now somebody somewhere is suggesting you had something to do with a close friend's death. Got to be tough stuff, I got to tell you. For a guy who certainly would seem to me to be innocent of that accusation.
Yep. We will continue to monitor it and see what happens, but it made its way in a big documentary. And oh, by the way, I should tell you, just real quick about the documentary and whether any of the producers have any.
But then again, anything can happen. I mean, just because him and Big was close doesn't mean that he's not somehow involved. At the end of the day, you never know.
Liability here. Let me ask you about this. Do the producers of this documentary put themselves in any hot water? Because Ari Mark, who is the executive producer of the doc, told the New York Post, we were really careful about making sure that we weren't saying necessarily that these things happened or that these things are necessarily true. But do the documentary, the words of Gene Deal, any trouble there?
Well, I wouldn't say for the producers. They're only providing what is being said. But if they take it the next step, they got to walk a careful line there, because the next thing they could be hit with is a defamation action. And I'm guessing that their in-house counsel made sure they walked that line and put as many caveats as they could into it, not suggesting that this was an allegation against Combs. But better be careful, particularly when you're dealing with something like this.
Yep. Brian McMonigal of the firm, McMonigal, Perry, McHugh, Meshack Davis, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, sir. Good seeing you.
Yeah, that P. Diddy situation with Big, yeah. I don't care what nobody said. I'm still standing on the fact that Diddy is responsible for Big's death for many reasons. One, he know that Biggie was going to end up leaving Bad Boy at some point after he released his second album to go start on his own label and bring the people from Bad Boy or any unsigned artist that plan on signing with Bad Boy with him. And somehow P. Diddy found out about it. He didn't like it. So that's one of the reasons. And well, basically that's like the only reason I think of. But yeah, because by that theory, I'm still believing that Diddy is responsible for that. But him being responsible for that Tupac murder, now I don't believe it one bit. That's that right there is Diddy is innocent in that party.
You can run, you can hide, you can bite, you can bark, but at the end of the day, you cannot escape from the dark. This world is hell, so what can you do? Positive power and protest is not enough to eliminate the wickedness that's cruel. By robbing hardworking folks for their money and killing innocent people with the lack of accountability. Corrupt cops locking a black person up for a small crime, but let a white person off for the murderous constant show. Typical situations is hard, but life is a lot harder. Experiencing both, it may be tough. Evil people's out to do evil things. It's up to you to mind yours and stay in your lane. But yo.